And we're on. Welcome to Arise and
Shine
with Jeanette and
Sandy.
Yay! Today we're going to tackle part of Hebrews 11 because it's like a big old Bible study. I want to even call it
40
like
verses.
Heroes of Faith. And I wish I had that echo. Wah, wah, wah. Faith, faith, faith. So I know that's my thing.
So here we are. Oh my gosh, we're out of this has been such a meaty book, and now we're on faith, and it's like, why is faith in the middle of this? But it dawned on me, and then I saw in a commentary that without faith, it's impossible to please God. So that's why this is here.
Right, and we're even going to see that verse. So this is totally a nuts and bolts Bible study. So
yeah. So we want to
buckle up.
Yep.
Hang on for the ride. Thank you, God, for this time. All right.
Okay.
You want to do 1 through 3?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. So 11:1 says, "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, comma, the evidence of things not seen. For by it the elders obtained a good testimony. By faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God, so that the things which are seen were not made of things which are visible." Okay.
And so what does that mean?
That.
Yeah, because that's a lot of stuff right there.
A lot of stuff.
So faith is a substance. Just as our physical eyesight is a sense that gives us evidence of the material realm that we can see it, faith is the sense that gives us evidence of the invisible or spiritual world. Oh, that's kind of a out there concept. So faith has its reasons. The Bible doesn't recommend just a blind leap of faith, but reasons can't be measured in a laboratory, and they have to be understood spiritually. So these are kind of the little contexty things. Faith extends beyond what we've learned from our senses. And the author is saying that it has its reasons. Its tests are not those of the senses, which yield uncertainty. And this is a commentary done by Morris. Physical eyesight, a conviction of evidence of visible things. Faith is the organ which enables people to see the invisible order. Another commentary by Bruce. Yeah. Have you got anything on that? There's so much.
There's so much. I know. It's like the scope of faith. I think what I want to say is I had the thought, and it's fleeting for a second. Okay, so with faith, right. So I think as human beings, we're all born with some measure of faith, because it takes faith to believe that we live in a world that was created. Because even if you don't believe in God, you have to have some measure of faith to understand that this world exists, that you breathe air, that you eat food that comes out of the ground, that is just nourishing, just right for your body. So see, by faith, you get up out of your bed and you go to work and you get in a car. You have faith that you turn your light on and that light's going to turn on. So you have to have some measure of faith to actually live. That's my little cut here as far as faith goes. Again, this faith we're talking about in the context of the whole book of Hebrews is because, remember, again, Hebrews was written to the Christian Jews, right? These new Christian Jews, and they were having a real hard time. So we're still talking, these guys were practicing, remember, not works by, not salvation by faith, but salvation by works for so long. And it was such a hard concept to get through their heads. So anyway, just some perspective there is that we all have some measure of faith, but this faith, as we're going to explain. So anyway, just starting off there.
Yeah.
Is again, it's like Jeanette said, and it's that substance, and you just don't see it yet. You just don't see it, and you have to believe that it's there.
Right.
Because God told us so. Seriously.
Right. And that's the cool part is that faith can prove that the Bible is the Word of God. Therefore, this is a belief beyond reason, but not in contradiction to reason or against reason. Kind of chew on that for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Faith is not the bare belief or intellectual understanding. It's the willingness to trust in, to rely on, and to cling to. And who we're doing that to, with God, right? So
Yeah.
that's the
Faith, the trust in, yeah. Faith is having trust in God, for sure. So,
yeah, so verse 2,
Yeah.
that was only verse 1.
That
See,
was only verse
this is
1.
why
I
we
know.
broke this up in two
Yeah.
parts. And
Yeah. Oh, I guess maybe we should talk about, because remember in the beginning of Arise and Shine, we also talked about not the other kind of faith, but faith in the way that faith being a gift also. And then because I guess there's like this big faith movement that's been around for a little bit now about, using faith as your personal source of power to like make outcomes happen the way that you want it to because you think you possess this sort of power. So that is incorrect.
Yeah.
And so if you think of faith like that, now you can pray to God. So we understanding faith has power, and that power comes from God, and that power is God. So it does say in the Bible that if you ask whatever you ask for in my Father's name, if it's according to God's will.
Key point.
So those are the things that have to happen, praying in God's name, and if it's according to His will. So we just can't use faith as our own personal little, weapon or
Right.
whatever.
So be careful of the name
Yeah.
it, claim it crowd.
Yeah.
And Hebrews 11, the second half, we're really going to talk through the nuts and bolts of that and what that looks like and how to deal when what you have faith for doesn't come into fruition during your lifetime, which can be pretty disheartening, but we have examples here in the Bible that we're going to go over through. But before that, let's give you some really good examples of faith. We haven't even made it to verse.
Oh wait, there is one more thing. I know, and there is the scripture in the Bible that says, the woman who touched Jesus's garment, hem of his garment, and he said, "Who touched me?" Oh, I'm sorry, no, it's not that one. I'm sorry. It's another story that says, "Woman," that he healed. Was it a woman? Yeah, woman, your faith has made you well. Okay, yeah. So there's that, but so God can do whatever He wants. Our pastor just went over that, and we don't want to put that in a box. But remember, if that faith is a gift being used for miracles and healings and things like that, that was a real short gap of time in our. Actually, I think he went over that this weekend. In our 6,000 year recorded history, we only have a small gap between 300 to 500 years where faith was used like that in miracles and healings and stuff like that. So anyway, the faith we're talking about is different in the context of Hebrews, just so you guys get it. Okay.
Right. And then the next verse 2, the good testimony. This is kind of where it comes to the nitty gritty of why the author of Hebrews is breaking this down. Remember Hebrews 10, it was all to build them up because they were the milk drinkers. And so now he's got to build them up. And this is basically a big chunk of a Bible study. And so these Jewish Christians, like Sandy was saying, they were discouraged and thought of giving up on Jesus and a distinctive Christianity. They needed a good testimony, so they needed these examples of faith, which we're going to go over, to break them out of the discouragement. So this is the buildup of why you're going to stick with what you believe in and why you made that original salvation testimony for these Jewish Christians. So I'm excited to go into this, and we're going to kind of tag team on the different people that he talks about.
Yeah, so faith basically enables people in the past, and we're talking about the Old Testament. We're going to bring up some people here, the Old Testament saints, that they overcame by faith.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yep.
And the point that they never received the promise yet, right? So,
Right, because faith is
yeah.
ultimately the salvation through
Mhm.
Christ.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they never got to see Jesus Christ, but
Yep.
they still did it by faith. Okay,
Amen.
so yeah, so let's talk about some of those people in the Old Testament and get some examples here. You're gonna start.
Yeah, so I'll start you off with Abel's faith. Now, Abel, I want you to think about Abel being, he represents worship of faith. So Genesis 4, 1 through 5, he was the first martyr in faith. I've never really thought about that, but that was brought up by J. Vernon McGee. And I'm like, oh, yeah, you're right. And then Abel's sacrifice signified that without the shedding of blood, there's no remission of sin. So I think too many times people get sidetracked with silly, or they're like, well, the meat versus the vegetables, and it's not about that at all. It's about Abel's faith in God, which made his sacrifice acceptable. So it wasn't by his doing, which Cain was like, I brought you the best stuff because I worked so hard at it. Abel was like, wow, this lamb is beautiful because you gave it to me. Thank you, God. And so that's the difference. And how did God choose? Well, that consuming fire came and burned up that sacrifice, and that's how God chose. It doesn't really say that in there, but that's how He's shown it before. And if they both made sacrifices, that would make sense that, crickets, 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 and Cain's veggies are still sitting there on the on the altar, and nothing's happening. All right, so
Scary.
yes, so and the sacrifice, Abel's sacrifice was preferred for no other reason than his faith. Yeah,
Okay.
and so that is Abel. So you're going to take Enoch.
All right, yeah. So another example would be Enoch. So he's another mystery man of the Bible here, and his account's in Genesis 5, 21 to 24. It's really short, so I'm just going to kind of read it here real quick. Enoch lived 65 years and begot Methuselah. After he begot Methuselah, Enoch walked with God 300 years and had sons and daughters. So keyword here is walked with God. And so all the days of Enoch were 365 years, and Enoch walked with God. It says again in 24, and then here's the kicker, semicolon, and he was not, for God took him. As simple as that is in the Bible, it's just always been so powerful for me. It's kind of like, what? And Enoch walked with God, and he was not. So basically, he was, and he was not. For those of you that know or don't know, it says, for God took him. So now if we go back to Hebrews 11:5, it says, by faith, Enoch was taken away so that he did not see death. So basically, he didn't die. God literally just sucked him up, and was not found because God had taken him. For before he was taken, he had this testimony that he pleased God. So that's just like plain and simple right there. And then verse 6 says, but without faith it is impossible to please him. For he who comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. So Enoch, it really is a mystery, but the key word like there for should be walked with God. And I was thinking about that, and that's, it sounds kind of cool. He walked with God. Does that mean a physical walk? Like he was physically walking with God? It's like, no. Enoch was within the will of God, probably his whole life then, and he pleased God. And in order to be in the will of God, you have to, kind of have to do God's will. You have to listen to him. And you're doing it all by faith. Mm-hmm. So he must have had major faith in order to please God, in order to be walking with God. So that's what all that entails right there. And then yep, God decided to just take him. I mean, that's just like amazing. He didn't have to experience death. So, and that's the mystery for me, because that's like breaking the law of gravity, you know. And so the only one who can do that is God,
Is God.
because those laws were set up that it's appointed once for man to die, says the scriptures, except Enoch
Mhm.
and Elijah. But
That's right. Yeah.
yeah, so
You're right.
Elijah was the other one that
Mhm.
that got to break that law. But like I said, I guess if anybody can break his own laws, it's God.
Exactly.
So anyway, that's what we have there. He was
Yes.
pleasing to God. And Enoch fulfilled the purpose for which man was created, it says, and that's in Revelation 4:11. So
I want to expound on that
sure,
little part that says, "But without faith, it is impossible to please Him."
absolutely.
Okay, and so the writer of Hebrews doesn't say it's difficult to please God. It says without faith, it is impossible. Impossible.
Yeah.
And so I have a little commentary by Newell that I was like, I was kind of scratching my head about. So it says these two elements seem most simple, but alas, how many professing Christians act as if God were not living? Huh? And how many others, though seeking after him, are not expecting him as rewarder? So I didn't understand this till Greg. Matter of fact, this morning he was reading Jesus Wept and what was going on there. So that really kind of opened my eyes. So the Marys, they believed, and they
Yes, they
believed
did.
in the life after. So they got it. So they got it, and they saw him as the rewarder, the
Yes.
whole picture, not just like, okay, God, if you were here, then he would have, which Greg was saying, which was the Pharisees there saying, well, why didn't Jesus come before? He could have saved him, and he wouldn't be dead. He saved or he cured all those other people. Why wasn't he here? And so there's the difference. One is complete. We really see the end picture where Martha goes, okay, I know you're the Christ, and I know that he'll be in heaven. We'll all be together alive again. She was able to say that. So it's really cool, kind of eye-opening. I digress. And then you're on to Noah again. Yeah, we've got more.
And then so now we've got Noah, right? So by faith, Noah, being divinely warned of things not yet seen, moved with godly fear, prepared an ark for the saving of his household, by which he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness which is according to faith. So his accounts in Genesis 6:8. And it says in 8, Genesis 6:8, Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. And remember that time the earth was corrupt before God, the earth was filled with violence. So God looked upon the earth, and indeed it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. And remember in the end times, so we're right here, it is the same. It would be the same also in the end times. And so
we're getting close.
We are.
When we're taken up to heaven, then it's going to be just like that all over again.
Like here.
Because nothing's going to stop anybody from having that filter.
Yeah, nothing's going to stop God from coming back for his kids too.
Mm-hmm.
And God said to Noah, the end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. And so he goes about to tell him, make yourself an ark of gopher wood, make rooms in the ark, and he gives them all of the, all how he needs to do it and all that. So I'm just looking for that one verse. Noah did according to all that God commanded him. So he did, jumping down to 22. And anyway, so let me go on to. Nope, never mind. Yeah, so, and they went into the ark to Noah 2 by 2 of all flesh, in which is the breath of life. And the flood was on the earth 40 days, the waters increased. So imagine this. I mean, I know you've probably all heard about it, but it's like, what was the name of that funny show? It was like a spoof of Noah's Ark. I'm
I
sure
don't remember.
it was like, was it Mighty Joe or no? Was that?
Yeah, I don't remember.
Anyway,
I don't think I saw it.
it's really funny. Those of you that know what I'm talking about, but I can't even remember the guy. Steve Carroll. Steve Carroll was in it.
Yeah. Evan Almighty.
Yes,
And
I think so.
it's like the second one.
I think it was. Anyway, it was a spoof on Noah's Ark, but it was
Yeah.
really good. But imagine how crazy that is to be building an ark when there's been no rain ever.
It's never been rain.
It's like, what is rain? What was rain? What is the sky doing? And this thing is like bigger than anything probably anybody's ever seen on top of that. So he must have looked crazy. But anyway, it doesn't matter. He listened to God, and he just did what God told him to do. And in the meantime, everybody else is running around, marrying and doing all the, whatever they're doing, traveling, walking around. And Noah is being obedient to him, to God. So there we go. So by faith, he constructed this ark that God asked him to construct. And that was an awesome example of that. So I don't want to get too much into it because we have like a whole bunch of people to go over still too.
All right, so if I could go on to Hebrews 8, Abraham's obedience of faith. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to the place which he received as an inheritance. And when he went out, not knowing where he was going. And so what that means is God called him out. He didn't really go where he was supposed to go. He stopped for a few years and then he continued on. Yet here, thousands of years later, what does God have him remembered by? As he was obedient, even though he delayed his obedience a little bit. So, and his faith, he's remembered for his faith. So that's a wonderful thing. And then let's go on to Hebrews 11, 9 through 10, Abraham's sojourning life of faith. Keeping that in mind, by faith he dwelt in the land of promise as in a foreign country, dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob, their heirs with him, the same promise, for he waited for the city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. All right, so dwelled is translated in the Greek paroikos, which means, is that it? Paroikos. Describing a resident alien, or one who lives somewhere who doesn't have permanent status. All right, so as Christians, are we living like this, or are we living like we're permanent residents of the earth? So are we living for God, or are we living, sorry, sunshine.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Well, we're supposed to be passers through, right?
Yeah.
This is not supposed to be our permanent home. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah, so that's a good question to kind of ask yourself. And with that, with Abraham, you can't think of Abraham without Sarah, which is Sandy's up again.
Wow. And you know what? I know we're both of us going back here between commentaries and Genesis and Hebrews, but I want to just real quick back to Noah because I found that verse. So because of Noah's faithfulness, and of course God destroyed everybody and everything else. But remember, at the end of that 40 days of rain, God said, so they got out of it alive, obviously. And God said, "This is the sign of the covenant which I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for perpetual generations. I set my rainbow in the cloud, and it shall be for the sign of the covenant between me and the earth." So, and I will remember my covenant which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. The waters shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. And the rainbow shall be in the cloud, and I will look on it to remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that's on the earth. Anyway, yeah, so pretty cool. Okay, so Sarah, so by faith, so for Sarah's, so I think we could think about these things like so these were everybody's different situations. Each of these Old Testament, greats had different such situations. So Sarah, remember, she, and I'm talking about her in her older life, right? In her older age, sorry, her older age. By faith, Sarah also received strength to conceive seed, and she bore a child when she was past the age. So past the age of giving birth. So her thing was, yes. Can you imagine having a child at 50? Yeah. I don't want to say my age, but that would be like having
For us.
children around now. Can you imagine having a kid at 60 or 70 or 80? We're kind of estimating, so she, like around 90. So that's incredible. And by faith, though, Sarah, because it says, because she judged him faithful who had promised. Faith comes down to judging that God is faithful and able to keep his promises. It was this faith that enabled Sarah to receive strength to conceive seed. God gave the strength, but Sarah received it by faith. So that's what happened. And then, what does the faith of Abraham and Sarah teach us? Should we kind of go through that? These all died in faith, not having. Okay, yeah. So we kind of talked about that.
Yeah.
These all. Should we do that at the end? Do you have anybody after Sarah to talk about?
Yeah, we still got Isaac and Jacob and Joseph. So yeah, but this is good. This comes back into those faith teachers and explaining why that's not where we're going and why it's not really biblical. So they died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar, they were assured of them, embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. For those who say such things declare plainly that they seek a homeland, and truly if they had called to mind that country from which they had came out, they would have the opportunity to return. But now they desired better, that is a heavenly country. Therefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. So yeah, and there's a little speed bump. Wait a minute, are you supposed to die in faith? What? So that's one of those, just, you'll hear, if you just have enough faith, you'll never be sick. If you have enough faith, you can drive any kind of car you want or live in any kind of home you want. If you just have enough faith. And that's such a burden. Don't even listen to that. Yeah. So all these people, they died in faith because what were they looking at? They were looking at the future Savior, not junk of this world, not stuff that's going to pass away. That's the difference in this faith, right? So it's the promise of the Messiah that had been given to them. They believed in God's salvation that he promised that he would provide. They all died in faith, not receiving this yet, not seeing it yet. So that's kind of, let's see.
That's faith.
Yes. So I'm going to sum that up in, they did not need to seek faith on their deathbed. They died in faith. Though they did have faith, they did also die. We do not have faith to escape death, but we die in faith. Okay. They never went beyond faith. They never went beyond faith and grew beyond simple dependence on God. That was a major thing. They depended on God. That's where their faith was. Okay, God will do it. God will provide. Yeah? And they never went below faith or lost faith. Pretty cool. Even though they came real close, even though they tried to fix it on their own a couple times. Yeah? So let's see. Verse 16. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be. This is a big one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God. And this really made me kind of another speed bump and like really think about this. When we must also consider that we make God ashamed of us when we do not regard God and heaven as eternity. And that's going back to verse 6 again that I read earlier, as real. There can be a sense in which God is ashamed to be called our God. So that's that part where I just read in verse 6, when we don't believe fully, that he's not alive, that he's not relevant, that he's not happening right now. And that's what that's talking about. I never really thought about that God could be ashamed of me. And I'm sure I've done plenty of stupid stuff that I was like, oh God, I am so sorry. That was like not a good moment for me. So, right? Just being real there, just being real. So I think we can move on to Isaac, right? Yeah. And 3, 4, Isaac.
Yep.
So this is kind of going into Abraham and Isaac. So by faith, Abraham was tested, offered up Isaac, and he who had received the promise offered up his only begotten son. So speed bump, didn't he have Ishmael? But wait, there's more. Let me finish telling you now. Okay. Of whom it is said, in Isaac your seed shall be called. So Ishmael wasn't recognized by God as a valid son. Wow, ouch. Yeah. So concluding that God was able to raise him up even from the dead, from which he also received him in a figurative sense. All right, so this is action packed here. What's going on here is, all right. So Isaac represents the willingness of faith. Isaac was a grown man, not a baby boy, when Abraham offered him on the altar. So that means he could have said, "Whoa, wait a minute, Pops, what are you talking about here? You're just having me carry some wood, and then where's the sacrifice?" So he knew. And what comes up with this is that Abraham knew. He recognized, let's see, sorry, I got discombobulated. This was Isaac's only son. No, he had Hagar's, Ishmael, Isaac would call, though all through Isaac shall seed be called, so that God did not recognize Abraham's work of the flesh, which he was trying to produce that heir. Remember, Sarah was like, well, if I can't have a kid, Hagar will have my kid for me, and I'll call him my own. God only recognized that work of his spirit, the son of promise, which was Isaac. All right, so the big thing here, Isaac probably knew, he was probably about 27 years old when he was taken there, and he could have stopped it. And the journey took 3 days. He told his servants to stop there, or actually, the journey took 3 days. So in Abraham's mind, Isaac was going to be dead. He doesn't know how this is going to work because he knows the promise of God. So this is where the cool part happens. Abraham realizes that there's going to be a resurrection. Even if he had to kill Isaac, because of God's promise, Isaac would be resurrected. So that's the only way he could have figured it out in his mind. Right? So this is where there's like a foretelling of Jesus. And this is why it's in Hebrews. So it can bring the Hebrews up to step. I'm like, oh, I get it now. That's what went on. All right. And then he's getting them fired up. All right. So Abraham thought Isaac was dead. And so Abraham's figuring out, okay, I'll go offer Isaac. But because he hasn't given me children yet, I know God's going to raise him up. So that's where he's got more faith, Abraham. Amazing, amazing. And so Abraham took, this is after God said, okay, nope, there's a ram over there. And Abraham took the ram, offered it at the altar, and he called the place Jehovah Jireh. And he prophesied, in the moment of the Lord it shall be seen. Jehovah sees. The word Jehovah has The word is Jehovah has vision, and it's translated Jehovah will provide. Well, the word provide is the base word of provide is vision, provision. With God, there is very little difference between vision and provision. God sees, He's going to take care of it, and God will provide. And just as a little side note, I know I digress a lot. Isaac was 3 days, 3 nights dead in the mind of his father. So Jesus, 3 days and 3 nights before his resurrection. Interesting. And Mount Moriah, the same place where Jesus died on the cross. Oh my goodness. Only in the Bible, right?
Like we went over that.
Yeah, we did. And so this is just a reminder, and that was in a different one. Yep. Okay, so Jehovah Jireh. And I think we're on to, okay, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau. So Isaac blessed. Isaac realized that he would always be defeated when he tried to resist God's will, even though he didn't like it. And he came to learn that despite his arrogant attempts, because he wanted to bless Esau against God's will was glorious. And so Jacob got blessed. All right, now Jacob's faith, going on to his son, by faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of the sons of Joseph and worshiped, leaning on the top of his staff. So what that means, Jacob led a pretty carnal life, yet his faith could also look beyond death, and he blessed each of his sons. So he's leaning on the staff because remember he was the one that wrestled with God, and then God touched his hip, and he was injured from there on. So
incredible lives.
Yeah. Therefore, he worshipped, demonstrating his faith and dependence on God, which leads us to the last one in this one, Joseph, which is all about Sammy. I know, crazy, right?
Wow. Yeah. There's a lot, you guys. You find a favorite of these Old Testament people and look it up and read it. It's very interesting, and you'll always pick up something new. Mm-hmm. So Joseph, those of you that don't know who Joseph is, real quick, just so I'm going to take it from the time that he was, because it goes way back, but Joseph with all his brothers and stuff, and then he was sold because his brothers played a really bad. Well, they were trying to get rid of him, basically.
They're jealous.
They were jealous of him, mm-hmm. And so anyway, he got sold
Got sold to Potiphar
to Egypt. Yeah. But anyway, and then later in life, he through a series of events, and God had a plan for him. Anyway, so this is the time in his life when he was prime minister over Egypt. He became basically, he was the it guy over all the land. And so during the time of the famine that was going on, he was in charge of like the grain and stuff. And so now back to those brothers that played, played that dirty trick on him, and then got him sold. Anyway, so they didn't have any food, and then they didn't realize that their brother was still alive, and now they need to go get food from their brother, who they have no idea is their brother.
Or is in charge of Egypt now.
Or is in charge of, is now prime minister of Egypt and in charge of all the food. So be nice to your siblings, if possible, I know. Anyway, so when Joseph was dying, he made mention of the departure of the children of Israel and gave instructions concerning his bones. Because see, now Joseph again, he was in Egypt, but he didn't want to be buried in Egypt. He wanted to go back to the land of Canaan. So it says here, by faith Joseph made mention, I already read that. I'm sorry. So anyway, Genesis 50:24. I know we're all over the place today. Just bear with us. So Genesis 50:24. Let me get there real quick. So this is Joseph saying to his brethren, I am dying, but God will surely visit you and bring you out of this land to the land of which he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Then Joseph took an oath from the children of Israel, saying, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here. So he was directing them, please do not leave me here. In fact, take my bones back with you. So Joseph died, being 110 years old, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. So yeah, he died in Egypt, and so he was never buried. His coffin laid above the ground for the 400 or so years until it was taken back to Canaan. So it was a silent witness all those years that Israel was going back to the promised land, just as God had said. And so by faith, Joseph's faith testified for years after his death. All during that time, when a child of Israel saw Joseph's coffin and asked why it was there and not buried, they could be answered because the great man Joseph did not want to be buried in Egypt. But in the promised land, God will one day lead us to. So his body served as, like that faith that they were going back to the promised land. So
Cool stuff.
yeah, that's really cool.
Cool stuff. So
Yeah.
that was plenty. We are going
A
to
lot.
end right there. That's why we broke this up in two parts. For heroes of faith. Faith. Yeah.
It's like a lot.
Mhm.
Heroes of the Old Testament by faith. So
Incredible Bible study in Hebrews, and we're going to give you more later. We're going to go through Moses and a lot of other stuff, and then explain when you don't get what you've been faithful for.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So so 21 through the end next time. But
Mhm.
yeah, have fun, you guys. Read some of these stories yourselves. And we'll see you Thursday morning at 7:30 at occc.church, and then just go to the video link. Do the study if you would like. It's much better because you actually have something to talk about with us, and plus you get to learn.
Mhm.
So okay, we'll see y'all then.
All right.
God bless everybody.
Bye-bye.
See you Thursday.